Okay, good morning. So today we're working on lesson 6.5, and that's on page 294. And we're going to do three different ways to working with percentages today. That is the key. So the first one is finding a percent. So if you have, they gave an example of if you had 2,000 people, and out of those 2,000 people, 204 were left-handed. What percent then is left-handed out of the 2,000? So this is finding a percent when you have the other information, but you're missing the percent. There are 4 steps. Here we are. So this is how you would set it up on a piece of paper so that you can keep it straight in your head and you can work it out. Okay? What percent of that 2,000 people equals 204? Okay, step 1, write a proportion. So we know the proportion is we have 204 people out of the 2,000 that are left-handed. So that's going to equal an unknown percent. So that's an unknown out of 100, 100%. Okay. All right, second step, you're going to write your cross products, okay? So you're going to cross multiply. So the first one we're going to do is 2,000 n equals 204 times 100. Okay, that's your first step. Now we know that this would be okay. Step 3. After you have done your cross multiplication and you have it looking like this, now you're going to divide, because we need to get rid of this 2,000 so that we have just the n by itself. All right, and in order to do that, we've got to get like I said, get rid of the 2,000, and it's being multiplied right now, so we need to do the opposite. So we divide. Divide this side by 2,000, and we're going to divide this side by 2,000. What you do to one side, you do to the other. Okay? So now we have the n by itself, and if you used a calculator, you should have come up with, I'm giving you a few seconds to do it yourself, but 10.2. Okay, so what percent of 2,000 equals 204? My answer is 10.2%. Okay, the next one that we want to look at is how do you find a part and the whole? Finding a part and the whole. So again, we're going to have a couple steps. Now the book shows you a couple different steps that you can do. And I'm going to do that first because that might be easier for you. And then I'm going to show you my shortcut. Okay, so if we have 20% of 55 equals what? That's my unknown. All right, the first step, write a proportion. So I have an unknown amount out of 55 equals 20% out of 100. There's my proportion. Now before I go do my next step, well, the next step is, I should say, the next step is to simplify it. So we're going to go and simplify this fraction because, proportion. This proportion stays the same. Now we're going to simplify this one. I went ahead and crossed off, they both have a 0, so I just took those off. Now I have 2 out of 10, and that can be simplified to 1/5. Okay. Now use the step 3 is to use common multipliers. Okay, so 5 times what equals 55? We know that's 11. So 5 times 11 equals 55. So therefore, what I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. Okay, so 1 times 11 equals 11. And then simplify if you have to. In this case, we don't have to. N equals 11. Okay, so 20% of 55 equals 11. Now that was the way the book showed you. I'm going to show you a little bit shortcut, a little shortcut. Okay, remember this is 20% of 55. So if I want to change this percent into a decimal, it would be 0.20, right? Move the decimal point 2 places over to the left. The word of means to times. Do that on your calculator, and you will come up with 11. Okay, 0.20 times 55 equals 11. And I came up with the same answer. That's a little bit of a shortcut. Okay, that is when you're trying to find a percent of 55 equals, what is that? Finding a part of the whole. You can do this. Okay? All right, the next one that I want to do is finding a whole. Okay, so the example they gave was, suppose you have an entertainment budget of 30% of your weekly wages from the job that you're working. So if you spend $10.50 for a movie night, so that's going to be what you're spending, your entertainment budget. Okay, so how much will you need to earn in order to stay within your budget? So first off, the first step with this is finding the whole. Let me, let's see. So let me switch the camera around. We have 30% of an unknown amount. 30% of your weekly income is going to be $10.50. Okay? There's your setup. 30% of what, your N, equals 1050. So you're trying to find the whole right here. All right? So in order to do that, first step, write your proportion. Okay? So the proportion is $10.50. You can go ahead and take the dollar sign off, but leave the decimal point in there. Out of $10.50, out of some total amount that you make, equals 30%. Okay? There's your proportions. Now you need to do your cross multiplying again. So we're going to do 30 times n equals 1050 times 100. Okay? And if you want to figure that one out, go ahead and get your calculator out. And you're going to do 1050 times 100. Okay, so, oops, I'm going to put that answer over here. All right, step 3, divide, because we need to get rid of this 30 so that we have just the n by itself. It's already being multiplied because it's sitting right next to each other, so that tells us that we're going to multiply. So in order to get rid of it, we need to divide. Do the opposite. Okay? And what we do to one side, we must do to the other. Okay, so go ahead and take your 1050, 1050, divide that by 30. Okay, oops, I'm going to need to move my number 3 down. All you have left on this side is the n. If you already, and you should have by now, went ahead and divided, and your answer would be 35. So 30% of 35 is $10.50. So you need to make $35 a week in order to be able to spend $10.50 on entertainment. All right. So I want to. Those are the three different ways that you will come up with problems that have percentages in them. I put them down right here. If you want to do this on page 295, they have the different concepts right there, kind of in a synopsis, a little all together in one place. Okay, if you're finding the percent, you might, first step is a proportion. Then you cross multiply. Then you're going to divide, and then simplify. Okay? If you're finding a part, there's also 4 steps, or you can do it my simpler way. When it looks like this, 20% of 25 equals. When you set it up and it looks like this, that's when you can use the shortcut. Change the percent into a decimal and then just multiply. Okay? Now when you're finding a whole, so 20% of what equals 5, then you do your 4 steps like we did up here. Same steps. Write a proportion. 5 out of the n, the unknown, equals 20 out of 100. And then you cross multiply, divide, and then simplify if you have to. Now what I noticed, I always look for patterns. That's what I do. To know how to set up your proportions in this one, or in all of them, you're kind of working your way backwards. If you're wanting to know how to set them up as proportions, this is 5 out of 25 equals blank percent over 100. Okay, that's how we set it up. 5 out of 25 equals an unknown percent out of 100, because when we're talking with percents, we're talking about 100s. Okay, and that's how you can set up your proportion. Same here. When you're setting up your proportions, it would be an unknown number out of 25 equals 20%, or 20 over 100. And that's how you set up your proportions. And the same with here. When you're finding a whole, you're going to set 5 out of an unknown equals 20 over 100. And that's how you set up your proportions, see? All right. So today's assignment is to obviously watch this video. And then on page 296, you need to do numbers 1 through 7. All right. Tell whether the answer to the question is a percent, a part, or a whole. Then answer the question. So number 1, what percent of 200 is 50? So how are you going to set that up? Let's go ahead and we'll do that one together. All right. So we have, flip it around. So write it as you are saying it. Write it out as like a sentence. For example, what percent of, oops, I just put the word, of 200 is 50. So I'm setting it up this way. So which one is that? I'll move this over here. Blank percent of 200. Which one of these is it? Does it look like this? like that, or like this. Which one is it? Well, it's finding the percent, right? Finding the percent of a number. So we're going to do these steps. Okay, you're going to write a proportion. So like I said, you kind of work your way backwards when you're setting it up, your proportions up. So 50 out of 200 equals a blank percent. That's what we're going to try and find out. Okay, there's your proportions. Now you can cross multiply, divide, and you have your answer. Okay? For number 2, it says 12 is 80% of what? So let's set that up. So we have the 80%, right? 80% of what? So that's going to be our n, is 12. So there's my setup. 80% of n equals 12. Okay, so which one is it over here? Is it finding the percent, finding a part, or finding a whole? The way it's set up, you're wanting to look for the whole. What is the whole amount? That we don't know. So that's what we're going to work on. So step 1 for that is write a proportion. Okay, work our way backwards. So 12 out of an unknown amount equals 80 out of 100. Okay, cross multiply, divide, and then simplify, and you will have your answer. Okay, let's look at number 3. 50%. Okay, so we have 50% of what number, so unknown, is 8. Well, that's the same setup as this one. So you're going to go through the same steps as you did for number 2. And then number 4. What part is 30% of 90? So we have 30% of 90 equals what? Okay, so that is which, finding the percent? No, we already have that. Finding a part? Yep, that's the one we want to do, this step here. So in this case, we can do our shortcut. So we have 30%, so let's go ahead and move our decimal point over. 1, 2. So you have 0.30 times 90, and you should have your answer. Okay? All right. So we went through numbers 1 through 4 together. You're finding out the answers, but I showed you how to set them up so that you can easily determine what is the process, what are the steps that you need to go through to find your answer. All right, that's your homework assignment, numbers 1 through 7 on page 296.